Welcome to House Beautiful Out Loud. Today we're going to be talking about the DIY to-do list before the bank holidays that are coming up. I'm delighted to have with me in the studio today celebrity builder, author and TV presenter Mr. Tommy Walsh. Tommy was a very successful self-employed builder before he was scooped up by Ground Force. He worked on the programme between 1997 and 2005 and became a household name and a household face. So we're delighted to have Tommy with us today to talk about the most common DIY tricks and tips that you can actually accomplish yourself over the weekend. Also with me today is Karen Stylianides, Deputy Editor of House Beautiful. Karen lives with her 3 young adult children in a 1950s end of terrace house. And Karen is going to pose to Tommy some of the familiar questions and ask for his advice on some of her own DIY decorating and gardening queries. So first, welcome Tommy.
Thanks, Julia.
And can you tell me what you've been up to recently?
Well, I've been very, very busy recently. We've got some new products that are coming out. One of the products is something that I've been trying to achieve all my life, really, which is finding a way to eradicate cowboy builders.
Yeah.
They're a curse to as much to the trade, to the building trade, as they are to the general public. So we've come up with what we think is a fantastic solution, but it works both ways. It sorts out the bad builders, the cowboy builders, but it also sorts out the bad clients, because it's not just a one-way street. You do have a situation sometimes where a client will be particularly difficult to please, no matter what you do for that client, in order that they can either refrain from paying some or all of the outstanding bill, or just really being very, very difficult for no apparent reason. So, but normally there's a financial incentive for themselves that if they can actually find fault, even if there is not a fault, then they won't have to pay the full price.
And also, presumably, sometimes there might be pressure on the builder from the client to actually take a cash payment, which the client might feel saves them both money.
Yes, well, this eradicates all that. This is a contract between the two parties who have the same interests at heart, and that is to get the job completed on time and for the price they both agree at the beginning. And the contract that comes out, no money is released or can be paid until the client is happy with the work, and it's all done in stages, and each stage that the client's happy, then they sign off and the money's paid.
Right, so is there a name for the scheme?
Yeah, this is the Home Improvement Guarantee, or HIGS for short.
Right.
And the idea is it works for both sides. It's free to the client, which is the really interesting part, and at the end of it there's a 10-year warranty thrown in, insurance if you like, for the client on the work that's been completed. And if there is a fallout between the client and the contractor, which is common, then there's a mediation service that's available. But if it goes beyond that, then of course the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, they supply independent surveyors who come and make a decision on whatever is the query or the problem, and his word and his decision is binding for both sides. And then, of course, they both agree to that in the beginning when the contract is signed. Right. So it's an independent arbitrator, really, if you like, when it gets that bad.
So people who are interested, how do you access the scheme?
Well, you go online and click on Home Improvement Guarantee, and then you'll find all the details that are available. And then if you want... See, the real good thing about this, if you want some work done, you want it done properly, and all the contractors that are on the list have to go through a process where they have to have a proven record of good behaviour, good business. Everything's done under contract, so there's no avoidance of taxes, VAT. A lot of people think that if you do a job for cash and you don't pay VAT, that you're saving money. The only problem there that if there's no paper trail and there's a query, then you've got very little comeback to the contractor. And likewise, the contractors very little come back to the client. Yes. So it really safeguards everyone, including the taxpayer, because the right amount of tax is paid into the government's coffers.
So, Karen, would that be a sort of scheme that would interest you as a householder? Is that something that you would be interested in taking up?
Definitely, I think so. Anything that would give me more confidence to know that I was dealing with, you know, a completely upfront organisation would be perfect, because, you know, there is always that doubt.
To the client as well. You
Absolutely.
see, so you as the client, there's no cost incurred.
Yeah.
And people say, well, how can that possibly work? Well, the cost is incurred by the contractor. He has to pay 3%, so we're very transparent about it. He has to pay 3% of the gross cost of the work. But if you consider, he'd only be too happy, as a contractor, I know, only be too happy to pay 3% to guarantee you're going to get paid. Because if you run on an overdraft, you're running at maybe 15, 20, 25% to run an overdraft. So 3% is very, very cheap to guarantee you're going to get paid.
Well, so everybody who didn't quite pick that up, the HIG Home Improvement Guarantee Scheme, go online and find it. It's active at the moment in the home counties, Surrey, Sussex and Kent, and
That's
due
right.
to be rolled out nationally soon, we hope.
Yes, no matter where you are in the country, you can make inquiries, and we have partners around the country. We're just concerned that if it's going to be as successful as it seems, we might be overrun, and we want to make sure we can roll this out fairly controlled so that we can offer everyone the correct service that we intend to give.
Great. Thank you, Tommy. So that's for people who want to bring in builders and specialists to do big renovation and repair work.
Anything from £2,000 size upwards. That's the lower limit is £2,000, and the upper limit is whatever it is.
Okay. But for those of us who are going to roll up our sleeves and do it ourselves this weekend and next weekend with the bank holidays coming up, can you give us some of your well-known and hard-won advice about which are the sort of DIY tasks you can take on yourself and which are the ones that are best left to the experts? So we were talking a little bit earlier, for example, about how a lot of people start their project literally the wrong way round. So you live in a terrace house, don't start at the front, you start at the back and work through, which is maybe something to do with the planning. So are there other key golden rules that you could share with people who are keen to, you know, roll up their sleeves and get the paintbrushes out this weekend?
Right. Well, the first rule of thumb is there's always an old saying in the building trade that if you fail to plan, then I'm afraid you're going to plan to fail, because it's all about planning. And don't be overly ambitious. It's only a weekend. So you've got to, and if you are over ambitious, what tends to happen, either the quality of the work suffers, or else the actual enjoyment, if there's any, or it becomes more of a chore rather than a pleasure. Because DIY, well planned and well executed, can actually be very, very rewarding. Not only from a financial point of view, but also from the point of view that when your friends come round, you can be very, very proud to show off what you've achieved.
Yeah.
And it's not difficult if you apply certain rules, and that is obviously to plan well. It really is. And the rule of thumb is that you always start at the top and work your way down. Right. And you start at the back and work your way forward, particularly if you've got what the majority of houses are in this country is terraced houses. And that's rather logical if you think about it. Why would you do all the inside of your house up? Say the kitchen, which goes onto the garden, and then you decide that you're going to bring 20 tonne of concrete into the garden after you've moved 20 tonne of rubbish the other way and all through your new kitchen. Yeah. So, you know, it's just think about it, really. One of the things I would say, if you're going to put a new kitchen in, you're very unlikely to be able to do this in a couple of days. So rather than sort of get really irritated by having takeaways, I would rig up a temporary kitchen in some other room. Right. And that's all you have to do. Remove your kitchen sink as part of it.
So don't try to use it. Don't just give up on the kitchen.
Give up on the kitchen because if it's going to go back where it was originally positioned, it's just going to be redesigned and moved around and maybe create some open space. You can't really run it as a proper kitchen for a family. So I would say, you know, rig up something in a spare room, take out the kitchen unit, put that up there, run some contemporary plastic piping from the services up to where you want to use it, and maybe just get hold of one of those little belling cookers, you know, the little tabletop
Baby
cookers.
Bellings,
And of course you use your microwave, and then you've got a temporary kitchen set up, so at least you can cook some decent food and not be running down to the fish and chip shop and the Chinese.
So you're not trying to cook and live, you're just doing one job at a time. Now, if you were to choose one job to do over the weekend, and we were talking briefly earlier about how you can make a big impact at the front, so would you agree that one of the big quick wins wins that you can have is to actually decorate the front of your home or spruce it up. And perhaps you could give some tips as to how you could achieve that.
Yeah, well, I always say, you know, with the spring coming around, it's a bit like rebirth of the year, and it's a fantastic time. The sun starts to shine. You know, you have blooms on the trees all coming out, and you know, it's just like everything's regenerated. So the first thing that people see when they come to your home is going to be the front of your house or your apartment, wherever it may be. So it'll either be a front gate, a front path, a front drive, a front door, or an apartment, you know, where you go through the common area and then you go up to your front door. So I would say to people, make that more presentable. It's not too difficult a task. You could do that in a weekend. A front gate, if it's made of timber, then you could treat that with a preservative, colour preservative, rather than paint it.
Right.
You shouldn't really use conventional paint systems on outdoor exposed timber, because what happens, the paint forms a seal, and the water gets trapped behind it, and the timber rots from inside, and you don't really know. So always use a preservative so the timber can breathe. And they come in a whole range of colours now, so you don't need something like, you've got cuprinol, you've got sadolin, and probably one of the best ones is Sikkens, Sikkens, a whole range of different products out there, which they have water-based preservatives or spirit-based. It depends on where you stand on CFCs and all that. But
so water-based is the eco choice.
That's the eco choice.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the professional's choice, because it's they're getting better every year. But for a really good quality, long-lasting finish, in the past it's always been best to use spirit-based ones, but it is changing now. They've got one which is 50-50, which is very good, and it does everything it says.
So maybe the 50-50 is the compromise. But you also had a really good tip if you just want to do a quick spruce up and clean up, literally, how you can actually clean up your front garden with a product which will just make everything look fresh and new without the paint.
Yeah, your front door, for instance, is what everybody sees, and the frame around it. People tend to sort of ignore that, really, and all the furniture on it. Take the furniture off, clean it all up, and with your front door, if you don't really want to take the time out to rub it down, undercoat and top coat it, then you could always wash it down with some sugar soap.
Right.
Now, sugar soap is a bit like when you wash a car or you clean a car with T-cut to polish it up. It's got a very fine abrasive in it, and it sort of takes a bit of the rough film off the surface and re-evokes the colour a bit below. So what happens then is you get this nice clean finish, but you must rinse it off. You've got to have two buckets, one with the sugar soap mixed with water, and the other one is clear water. So as you wash down sections, then you've got to rinse it off to make sure that the sugar soap doesn't dry and stay on there. And then you get a real nice clean finish, and it sort of livens up the colour. But if you decide after that you do want to paint it, what you've done by using sugar soap, you've actually prepared the surface ready for undercoating and top coating anyway. So it's a win-win situation.
Kill two birds with one stone. And you can get your sugar soap in any local DIY store.
Yeah, it's not much more than $5 for a box of it. And if you have got a front garden, clean, prune back the plants, have a nice little display of different size pots by the front door, and put some nice shrubs. Put some hanging baskets up, some way just to brighten it up naturally with some lovely plants, even if you put some bedding plants in. All you want to do is when anybody comes to visit, family or friends for the new season, you want them to say, wow, this looks really lovely, it's welcoming, and it doesn't cost much money.
Yeah. Which brings us nicely to gardens, and I know Karen has actually got a question about her own garden. She's got her own plan for the weekend coming up. So Karen, what's your key issue with your garden?
Yes, Tommy, so I've got quite a large back garden, and it's a wedge shape because we're on a corner plot, and it's laid mainly to lawn, but the grass is not really in great condition. I've got 3 mature trees in the garden as well, and there's quite a lot of moss under the trees. So it takes me quite a long time to look after it, and I wondered if you've got any advice about how I can make it more of a low maintenance garden.
You have are you a terraced house or a semi?
It's end of terrace.
So you have access to it from
the side. Yeah, there is a side entrance.
It's a huge advantage for you.
Yeah.
There's no quick and easy fix to an alternative to a lawn. A lot of people like to maybe strip a lawn up, put a membrane down and cover it in gravel, which is okay, but it becomes a bit of a sea of stone. And one of the downsides to doing that is it does become a bit of a public urinal for the local cats and not so much dogs, but cats and foxes, which is not really something that you want to encourage. But if you've got 3 mature trees, grass very rarely grows successfully under trees, although they do make a special type of grass seed now that is particularly resilient in the shade, and also, believe it or not, resilient against local cats and foxes using it as a public toilet. So what happens is, if they do it, the grass will persevere and grow through. But what you can do would be, if you want to retain the trees, you can take mark out a circle immediately around the tree, probably to where the grass doesn't do very well and where it starts to pick up.
Yeah.
A little tip: you can either use a string or a rope to give you that circle, and you might have to be a bit clever to get it exactly right, as in the circumference, get the shape right, or else just do something quirky. And then you can take up the grass from the area, put a membrane down, and maybe have different types of gravel, different sizes of gravel, and different colours around there. And you can make it a bit feng shui, because there's a way that you actually move the stones.
Feng shui garden, Karen.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounded good so far.
You can then put, because you've got a membrane and a stone down, you could actually then, put a bench on it. You can make a circular bench that fits under the tree.
Oh,
so all of a sudden, and that's not too difficult to make. You can buy them. They come in sections, a bit like you have the circular patios now, and you can put that round the tree, and then all of a sudden it gives a practical use for it. If you crown lift a tree, and that means by cutting back some of the major branches and stop lower down, all of a sudden you reshape the tree. It gives you an area close in, and it allows light in.
Right.
So then you can because that's now if you've got 3 trees, that's quite a lot less lawn that you're going to have to focus on. So that means you can spend more time on the lawn that you do have.
Yeah.
And what it needs is a good feed. You need to use an aerator, so get a fork. You're far too light. Maybe I should come round with. I've got an abundance more.
You're welcome to come round any time and see to my garden.
Get a garden fork and fork it all over so that you let it breathe, let it air and water it, feed it, and then cut it tight with a lawnmower, really tight, and any bald patches, scratch the surface, and then plant some really good seed. Quality seed, and nurture that. Make sure the birds don't come and take it all, and you'll be surprised how quick you can turn around a lawn with a bit of effort.
Yes.
And that should see you have a comfortable summer, and then you continue working on it next year, and then before you know it, within a couple of years, you can turn that lawn around.
So it's not really a weekend project, but for instance, I could get started on it during a weekend, and then maybe it will progress. And
so could Karen put the seed down now, for example? Which is the right time of year?
I don't want to sadden you, but gardening is never just a weekend
never a
task.
quick fix.
I'm afraid gardening is something, once you get bitten, you're going to be doing it for the rest of your days.
Right. Yes.
So, and it's the same with DIY. Some people make, say that it's like painting the Severn Bridge, it's never ending. But what it is, it's about planning it. You want to do it in certain times and achieve a certain amount of success, and then have some time to enjoy it.
Yes.
The whole idea is, if you get a certain amount of work done, put a proper plan in place when you want to do it, so that you do have time to enjoy it and enjoy yourselves. Otherwise, there's no point.
And whilst we're on the subject of gardens, Tommy, perhaps you'd like to share with all the listeners the kind of perhaps one of the most famous gardens that you ever revamped, which was part of your series that you ran with Ground Force when you went down to South Africa and redid Mr. Nelson Mandela's garden.
Yes, that was quite a feat back in 2000. It was the first time that we'd ever done a Ground Force abroad, and when it came up, it seemed a great solution, because you can't really do gardening in the winter in this country, although we did try. So then it was deemed logical to go abroad. And as soon as we had a South African production manager working for us on the show, and as soon as he mentioned the fact that he might know somebody who might be able to get us an opportunity to talk to Nelson Mandela's wife to surprise him, for me there was no other alternative. But we did have to have a backup plan. And ironically, the backup plan was to do the Clintons' new garden on their new house in New York, where, ironically, Nelson Mandela was actually staying when we did his back garden.
Wow.
And we did have a third...
What a decision. The Clintons or Nelson Mandela.
To me, Nelson Mandela won hands down.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we went over to visit South Africa, and it was very emotional because we went to part of the story, of course, was to go to Robben Island, which is a World Heritage Site, and to visit where Nelson Mandela actually spent all those years in jail. And it's very strange because he was a big guy. People don't realise that. He was 6'1", and he was an ex-boxer, so he was a tough cookie, and he was a qualified lawyer. And in his cell, the only way you could lie down on his cell and stretch out was to go corner to corner. That's how small it was. And it was on a concrete floor, and you were given no bed linen, no clothing, and they wore shorts. So they were very cold. It's very cold there in the winter. And then we went down to the quarry where they used to make him spend his days. This is a qualified lawyer who had to squat down on the floor with big lumps of limestone and a hammer and break them into small stuff to fill holes in roads. So that wasn't a very good use of his time. And that, obviously, we went to there, and the reflection from the limestone was very damaging to your eyes. And we struggled with that, and that left him permanently damaged, his eye damage, from working in that pit. So then
when you actually then came to designing his garden, did you sort of have to take that into account? Did you think, well, we need colour in the garden? Is his eyesight slightly restricted, or did you just do your own, what you were going to do anyway?
Well, we tried to incorporate ingredients within the garden that he would enjoy. The thing that was very different between us and changing rooms gave the public what they thought they wanted, but it was them who decided. We gave the public and the recipient of the garden what they actually wanted, what their best wish was, and then we embellished that a little bit more. And we had Nelson Mandela. One of the funny features, it was to be right outside his private study, and he had these long narrow windows immediately next to him that gave him like a set of curtains right along the wall. So Alan designed a rill, a long narrow stretch of water, and at the end of it, as he looked out, we've managed to acquire his family stone, where it was a bit like a traditional stone for mashing up maize to make into a bread. That's it. Thanks for that, getting me out of trouble. I couldn't think of what it was called. But it was a huge big lump of sandstone, and it was roughly hewn out, and that was that's what they used to use. So we stood that upright and made it a feature at the bottom of the reel, and he was beside himself when he got it. And we had a local artist do some fantastic hand painting on some of the timbers that we put up. All sorts of different angles, which had stories about Nelson Mandela's life and the life of the people in the locality. And all the stone we used was local, all the timber that was used was sourced locally. And, of course, the grass. Now, that was a bit of a feat. The grass was very poor. It was a bit like your story. I'm afraid this was stuff that we acquired, good quality, allegedly good quality turf, but it really was a struggle to grow. But we brought all the plants with us from Cape Town. We're in the back of the truck, so we acquired them all there, and there's such a fantastic range. There's a great, huge, big botanical gardens there. Bostonwurst or something it's called. I can't remember it. I'm not very good with names like that. But we went there and saw, a fantastic selection. We took all those with us up to his back garden, and then, of course, we created this magnificent garden.
And what was his reaction?
His reaction was fantastic. We were so tense and nervous meeting this great man. He was only just stepped down from president of South Africa at the time. And when he arrived, he had this big entourage with him, obviously for security and advisors. And as he came around the corner, his wife was Gracia Michelle. She was fantastic. She was the person who was behind this, and she was a liaison with us. She stayed here while he went to America to the Clintons. So she liaised with us, and she was so excited. When he came around the corner, straight away he knew. He looked at it and he went, my God. And he knew. He said, this is the BBC. And he must have said the BBC 10 times in his first opening gambit, and everyone, the BBC, were really pleased. And he was so enamoured with it. And of course, people don't realise Nelson Mandela was locked up for 20 odd years, 25 years. And all that time away, he had a bit of a glint in his eye for the ladies, you see, which you can understand. And he really took a shine to Charlie. He thought she was very similar to Ginger Spice.
Oh, right.
So
well, we know he had to punch on for the Spice Girl.
There was a little bit of magic there between them, and we had a great time. And at the end, he did come over to me and shook my hand, and he took me aside privately, broke away from his entourage and said, Tommy, I just want to say to you, remember my name? He said, I just want to say to you once more, thank you very much for what was probably the most wonderful gift I've ever received. He said, you may not know this, he said, these are more or less his words. He said, but the only thing that maintained me while I was in prison and kept me alive was the fact that I was allowed a very, very small garden in which to tend. And that kept me sane and kept me alive. So gardens and gardening has always had a special place in my heart. And I promise you that as long as I'm alive, I will keep this garden looking as beautiful as you've given it to me.
Oh, what a wonderful story, Tommy. What a wonderful story.
And it was really sort of ironic that most recently I was invited to the premiere of the great film about his life, Nelson Mandela. My wife and I were in the audience when, at the end of the film, his daughter and the producer came out on stage and told us that whilst the film had actually been shown, sadly Nelson Mandela had passed away. So I don't know, it was quite ironic that the book was about The Long Walk to Freedom, which is the book that he wrote about his life. And I just thought it was sort of poetic that he'd finally finished his long walk to life, freedom, and it was time for him to lie down and go to sleep.
Oh. Thank you, Tommy, and thank you, Karen. So today at House Beautiful Out Loud, we've covered a lot, from sprucing up your front door to dealing with mossy tree-laden gardens, to a wonderful, wonderful story about Nelson Mandela and the garden which Tommy Walsh revamped for him. Tommy, I think we could go on all afternoon. I think we'll have to ask you to come back and do a part 2. Thank you to Tommy. Thank you to Karen. This is House Beautiful Out Loud.